All right, let's graph some tangent. You'll notice that you have three examples and the second one repeats. So we're going to change this third one to this one that's written here now. Okay, and then we're going to start here as well. So take a second, pause the video, change this third one. All right, and we're going to start there. We're going to go out of order. I'm sorry, got to do what you got to do here. So let's get going. All right, hopefully pause the video. All right, so first thing, remember, there is not an amplitude, but there is an A value. Our vertical stretch in this picture is going to be 4. All right. Our period is, remember there's a 1 there, so our period is equal to pi. Remember, tangent is pi, so pi over b, which is just pi. Our horizontal shift is our c value, which is right pi over 4. Vertical shift, none. Interval is our period over 4, which is pi over 4. And there is no flip. No flip. Okay, so now, notice how there's not a y-axis here. That was on purpose. All right. When doing this, first of all, I'm going to apply that there is no vertical shift. All right, so that does not change. Okay. There's no y-axis because of these horizontal shifts. There's always going to move left and right, so you want to give yourself enough space sometimes because tangent can be tricky. All right, since it's just pi over 4, I'm just going to draw it here. Okay. To give myself just a little bit of space. Just a little bit of space. My A value, my vertical stretch, was 4. So 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Negative 4 and 4. All right. What's next? My horizontal shift was right pi over 4. So that looks about pi over 4. My interval is pi over 4. So since my horizontal shift was right pi over 4, that's my middle point. Remember, tangent looks like this. 2 vertical asymptotes, our middle point, our value at -1, our value at +1, or at our A values. It looks like that. Okay? So our middle point shifted to pi over 4. To find my asymptotes, I move 2 intervals past it. So this is 3 pi over 4. And that's going to be 4 pi over 4, which is just pi. So there's 2 units to the right. That's my vertical asymptote. Pi over 4, interval minus pi over 4, so 0 counts. And then negative pi over 4, which is also an asymptote. All right. Okay, remember now. All right. Our A value is 4. Am I missing anything so far? No. Okay, so our A value is 4, so I go right 1. Usually I go right 1, up 1. Since my A value is 4, I'm going to right 1, up 4. And I'm going to left 1, down 4. And connect my dots. And that's a little too... Let's make that a little more curvy if I can. Yeah. That's all right. The first one is probably a little bit better, okay? But as long as it goes through that middle point, remember, you can make your dots a little bit bigger to make sure your line goes through it, okay? What else? I could continue to go. I keep going on if I wanted to, even though it says graph 1 period. This would be 5 pi over 4. This would be 6 pi over 4, 3 pi over 2. This would be 7 pi over 4. This would be 2 pi. This would be my middle. Down to -4, up to +4. There you go. And my vertical asymptote. So I just graphed 2 periods for you there just because it was pretty fun. All right. So that's my first one. Okay. Remember, just identify your key features first. Okay. Apply your period or your horizontal shift. Okay. Remember that horizontal shift shifts your middle point. All right. Let's go back to number one now, the first example. Okay. Here, excuse me, my amplitude, my A value, not amplitude, sorry. Why did I just say amplitude? My vertical stretch is 2. Man, I just said amplitude. Shame on me. Wow. All right, my period is pi over my B value. Remember, we can pretend like there's a 1 there. So it's pi over 1, which is just pi. All right, my horizontal shift is my B value. So in this one, I'm going left, pi. Vertical shift is again none. My interval is just period over 4, so my interval is pi over 4. Now flip. Okay. Vertical shift did not happen. Now, my horizontal shift was left pi. So I'm going to give which means I'm going to work in a lot of negative space. I'm going to give myself a lot of space here. Okay, I'm going to give myself a lot of space. So I move left pi, and I'm going to say this is about, let's say this is about negative pi. So that's going to be my middle point right there. Make it nice and big. Again, I'm going to move 2 units to the left and 2 units to the right. All right. So now some of us may struggle with our fractions and things like that. So this is negative pi plus pi over 4. Well, technically, negative pi is 4 pi over 4, right? It's just 1 for a common denominator. So if I add that, I get negative 3 pi over 4. So my next tick mark will be negative 3 pi over 4. Add it again, I get negative 2 pi over 4, which is just pi over 2. 2 units to the right, vertical asymptote. 2 units to the left, I take negative 4 pi over 4 minus pi over 4 to give me negative 5 pi over 4. So I got negative 5 pi over 4, negative 6 pi over 4, which is negative 3 pi over 2. And there's my other or vertical asymptote. All right, graph 1 period. Okay, my vertical stretch was 2. So I have 2 and negative 2. And I connect my dots. There you go. Trick of the trade. Make the dots bigger sometimes. And I could keep going. I could keep going as well. But I'm just going to leave it at that for this one because I didn't give myself enough space. All right. Last one of the day. Holy buckets. Here we go. Okay. So my vertical stretch is 2. My period will have to take out that 3, and that's going to be x minus pi divided by 3. All right. So my period is pi over my B value. Now, it just so happens that these are both the same. That's not always going to be true. Don't let that trip you up. This did not come from here. This came from dividing pi by my B value, which is also 3. My horizontal shift is right pi over 3. There's not a vertical shift. Interval, pi over 3 over 4. Remember, this is pi over 3 times, this is 4 over 1, divide by a fraction, multiply by the reciprocal, so I get pi over 12. Hopefully we're getting better at that. And there's a negative out in front, So there's a flip. All right. So, since there is a flip, okay, remember, vertical asymptote, middle point. Well, instead of starting down here, I'm going to start up at my vertical stretch and hit my vertical stretch. So my tangent graph should look something like that instead. Okay. What else? What else? What else? Anything else? Now let's graph. Here we go. So I'm going right pi over 3, so I'm leaving myself some space here. All right, my vertical stretch was 2. Or my... Okay, what the heck just happened there? Let's just... Thank you. No vertical shift. All right. My horizontal shift was right pi over 3, and we're going to give ourselves some space here, so we're going to say that's about pi over 3. Okay, so that's my middle point. All right, now my intervals are pi over 12. So I have pi over 3 plus pi over 12. Well, common denominator, I'm going to multiply this by 4. To make that 12, let's make that 12. I'm going to write it in black. And I multiply the top by 4 as well. So my next tick mark will be 5 pi over 12. My next tick mark after that would be 6 pi over 12, which is pi over 2. All right, if you're having trouble with the fractions, I like to write it down here and then realize, okay, 6 pi over 12, all right, that's pi over 2. Okay, that's 2 units to the right of my middle point. So I have a vertical asymptote. Now I need to find my other. Let's go 4 pi over 12 minus pi over 12 is 3 pi over 12. 3 pi over 12, if I simplify that, that's just pi over 4. 2 pi over 12, which is just pi over 6. Okay, and then I have a vertical asymptote there, because that's 2 units to the left. Now, usually I go over right up 1. Well, since it's a flip, we can go over right down to my vertical stretch. Now I'll go over left down my vertical stretch. I'm going to go over left up my vertical stretch. And, oh man, that's so bad. Oh, bad again. This one's tougher. Oh, third time's a charm. Make that dot bigger. There we go. Hope I didn't pop your eardrums on that. Okay, so if you remember back to our last video, I said you could also find your horizontal, or excuse me, your vertical asymptote by setting negative pi equal to b times x minus c, which is right there. All right, well, I'm going to do that. 3 times x minus pi over 3. So I would divide both sides by 3. This is another way to find your first vertical asymptote. If I divide by 3, that's multiplying by 1/3. So I have negative pi over 6 equals x minus pi over 3. Add pi over 3. Add pi over 3. Which is really, multiply the top and bottom by 2. That's 2 pi over 6. So I have pi over 6 as my first vertical asymptote. Well, if you look up here, pi over 6 is our first vertical asymptote. So that's another alternative way of finding your first vertical asymptote. Or you can just go based off your middle point. And that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to move 2 units to the left and 2 units to the right of my middle point to find my vertical asymptotes. We will continue to practice this. Hopefully this helped. All right, hopefully you had some fun. I know I did. All right, we will see you soon. Can't wait.